I uncovered 7 terrifying cases of strangers living in the walls, who never left. I never should have opened that door. It was a normal day, or at least it started that way. I was home alone, scrolling through old photos, the warm light from my lamp casting soft shadows across the room. Everything felt safe, comfortable. But then came the sound, a distant thud. My heart skidded. A chill crept up my spine. The walls of my home didn't just trap memories. They felt alive, breathing, whispering secrets I wasn't meant to hear. I shook it off, rationalizing. Old houses settle, right? But then another noisy scraping, like nails on a chalkboard. I took a deep breath, the air thick and stale, and listened harder. The shadows seemed to dance, pulsating. I glanced around the room. Everything felt wrong. Dust motes caught the light, swirling like tiny ghosts. I could hear my pulse, fast and heavy. I got up, moving quietly, my bare feet brushing against the chill of the wooden floor. Then a flicker caught my eye. A shadow passed by the door frame, too quick to be anything real, and yet I felt something was watching me. My gut twisted. The very walls felt as if they were tightening around me. I raced to the hallway, every creak of the floor echoing like a scream. There were stories, horrors, that seeped through the very foundation of homes. I searched for meaning, wondering about the strange cases of people being discovered hiding behind trapdoors or walls in forlorn houses. The thought of them, strangers who had disappeared, living in darkness, sent a shiver through me. An object flew off the shelf, crashing to the ground. I froze. It was like the house itself was rebelling, angry at my intrusion. My breath grew shallow. I turned to run, but then, from the corner of my eye, I spotted a figure, shrouded in shadow, standing at the end of the hall, a grotesque silhouette against the dim light. My throat tightened. I couldn't scream. I couldn't move. The shadows around it seemed to swirl, biting at the edges of reality. Was this one of them? One of the strangers? I took a step back, heart racing, thoughts screaming to get away. Then it happened. A door slammed somewhere in the house, echoing like a gunshot. I was not alone. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button. It really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The air thickened with an oppressive silence, broken only by the pounding of my heart as I watched the figure shift ever so slightly. Its outline was distorted, as though the shadows themselves conspired to twist its form beyond recognition. Instinct took over. I bolted down the hallway, the wood beneath my feet creaking in protest, like a warning echoing through the house. I dashed toward the kitchen, my mind racing with questions yet unspoken. What had I awoken? What unspeakable truths lay hidden behind those walls? The door to the basement loomed ahead, slightly ajar, the darkness below beckoning with a sinister promise. I hesitated, torn between the urge to flee and the compulsive need to understand. But then came a low, guttural whisper that slithered through the crack beneath the door. "Help us," it crooned, the voice warped, layered with a chilling chorus that made my skin crawl. A frigid gust swept through the hallway, snuffing out the light from my lamp, leaving the house cloaked in darkness. I gripped the edge of the counter, feeling the cold metal of a knife in its block, the only comfort within my reach. The urge to investigate was hypnotic. I crept closer, breathing shallowly, listening as the whispers transformed into frantic pleas, the lamenting of those once trapped. "Help us, don't abandon us." It was both a plea and a promise of eternal suffering. I knew I should escape, but part of me was drawn to the voice, to the possibility of salvation for the lost souls. Who are you? I found my voice, trembling yet defiant. Silence enveloped me, followed by the sound of something dragging across the floor. The door creaked wider, revealing a gaping maw of darkness. Shadows twisted into shapes that flickered in my peripheral vision, teasing me with glimpses of despair. It was a choice, a maddening one. My hand trembled as I placed it on the door handle. With a swift motion, I flung it wide open, revealing a narrow staircase plunging into inky blackness. I gripped the knife tightly and edged closer, my heart racing, each pulse resonating with the drumroll of impending doom. What awaited me below? A part of me flirted with hope, the idea that I could rescue those who had been tormented. But another part whispered the undeniable truth that those in the walls were not meant to be freed. My breath turned ragged, and I took my first step down into the gaping void. As I descended, the whispers intensified, a cacophony of sorrow and madness washing over me, threatening to drown out my very thoughts. With each step, cold tendrils curled around my ankles, pulling me further into the depths. A flicker of light shone faintly below, causing my pulse to quicken as dread seeped into my bones. Then, I froze at the bottom of the staircase. The small room was lined with old newspaper clippings, yellowing from age, detailing tragedies and missing persons. Every face was etched in desperation. My stomach twisted as I realized that I didn't just find shadows. I had found evidence of lives taken or stolen. Suddenly, the whispers coalesced into a single voice, sharp and clear. "You shouldn't have come here, you're next." I spun around, ready to flee, but the air shifted, thickening as if saturated with malevolence. The shadows around me thickened, solidifying into grotesque figures, eyes glinting with a hunger that threatened to consume me whole. I stumbled back, the knife slipping from my grasp, and the door I came through shuddered violently, slamming shut. Their hands reached out, spectral fingers brushing my skin, cold as winter's breath. They were no longer just observers. They wanted something, and it wasn't just my fear. As I backed against the wall, I felt the weight of their collective gaze, the despair of the forgotten tightening around my throat. Just then, my phone buzzed in my pocket, startling me. I fumbled for it, my fingers trembling as I brought it up to my face. The screen illuminated the darkness for a fleeting moment, revealing the wall behind me no longer just wood but a grim collage of faces trapped, their mouths moving in silent screams. Before I could even comprehend, my phone buzzed again. The message on the screen flickered and changed. "They're coming for you." The shadows pressed in closer, their despair morphing into a desperate rage. I turned to run, but my body wouldn't move. The walls began to close in around me, and I realized these ghosts weren't merely trapped, they were hungry. And then I felt a hand upon my shoulder, icy and all-consuming. Terror seized me as the icy grip tightened like a vice, its contact sending shockwaves of abject horror racing through my veins. I spun around, desperate to confront whatever fiend had seized me, but what I saw froze me in place. There was no face, no form, just a swirling mass of shadow that seemed to encompass the very essence of dread. Its eyes, if they could even be called, that were hollow voids that absorbed the dim light, draining the warmth from the room around me. "Help us," the chorus began again, layered and intermingled with a sinister chuckle. Each word dripped with malice, a cruel mockery of the compassion I had thought to offer. "You're one of us now." The realization cut deeper than any blade. They weren't just the lost and lamenting souls I yearned to rescue. They were ravenous, seeking sustenance from my very essence. My breath quickened into panic as the swirling shadows tightened, pushing against my chest, reducing my world to a suffocating darkness. Panic surged within me, igniting a primal instinct. I slammed my body against the wall where the haunting faces flickered, and to my horror, the faces seemed to merge and morph, their eyes locking onto mine in perfect synchronization, an unholy collective that spoke a single truth: You will stay." The very air was alive with their discordant whispers. A vision flickering to life before me, a house aflame, screams of children lost within the inferno. But right at the center, amid the chaos, was a girl, the same face I saw in the article about the fire, one of the missing children. Her eyes, wide and desperate, bore into my soul as if trying to bridge the void and pull me into her madness. "Save me!" she cried, and I recoiled as the air around me remembered her pain, igniting a fury amongst the shadows. "You'll never leave," another voice hissed, as the grotesque figures began to draw closer, their blackened fingers stretching out, yearning for a taste of life. I needed to act, and fast. Me survival hinged on a spark of ingenuity. In a frenzy, I felt along the wall where the faces writhed, and my fingers stumbled upon the jagged edge of a piece of broken wood. Gripping it tightly, I swung it toward the shadowy mass as if to part the darkness itself. "Get away from me!" The shadows hissed, recoiling from the sudden flash of what they perceived as light. They dissolved briefly, losing their cohesion as I forced my way toward the door, praying it remained ajar. But the door was no longer there. Brick and mortar had replaced it, a solid barrier that mocked my attempts to flee. I screamed, the sound swallowed by the ambient chaos. It was then that I caught a glimpse of movement behind the faces trapped upon the wall. They were not just stationary figures. They twisted and turned, their mouths forming words twisted by despair. "Join us." I turned to run against the now solid wall, the jagged piece of wood slamming against it, splintering under my rage. A cacophony of howls erupted around me as the shadows seemed to pulse, responding to my despair, feeding on my fear. Then I heard something, the laugh of the girl, echoing as if through a corridor of time. It sliced through the madness, sharp and unyielding. "They know you're here, and they won't let you leave." My mind reeled, the images blurring together, the fire, the faces, the living shadows. I glanced down at my phone, its screen flickering once more. The device held a new message. "They have taken the light. Find it, or it will consume you." The figures writhed in agitation, the atmosphere thick with their insatiable hunger. In a desperate bid, I turned to the faces behind me, whispering words of salvation, hoping to rekindle a flicker of humanity within their depths. "I can help you. Just tell me how." The wall shifted, the faces merging into one. "Find the light," it echoed. "He's the key. Bring him back to us." Before I could grasp the meaning, the shadows surged forward, blurring into one relentless torrent of despair. I staggered back, my heart pounding in a rhythm louder than the whispers, and in that moment of terror, I felt the shadows grasp on me, intensify like a vice around my soul. The whispers crescendoed, merging into a thunderous roar. "You're one of us." With every ounce of strength, I wrenched my body free from the borderline of their grasp and lunged toward the bricked-up door. I pressed my palm against the cold surface, desperate to break through. And suddenly, the wall gave way, buckling under pressure, revealing a narrow tunnel pulsating with faint, shimmering light. But it was then that I saw him, the shadow of a boy, trapped just beyond the threshold. He was the key, the lost light beckoning me. I heard the whispers transform into a chant, a frenzied promise of what awaited me should I make my choice. I reached out, my heart torn between salvation and doom, just as the shadows lunged over me, drowning my voice in haunting cries that pierced the darkness. My fingers brushed against the boy's hand, and in that second, I felt all hope waver, teetering on the edge of choice, life or oblivion. And then the tunnel collapsed in thunderous silence. The echoes of my scream suffocated under the weight of darkness as the tunnel caved in, the flickering light swallowed whole by the insatiable void. The boy's presence evaporated like smoke in the air, leaving only a stifling silence that draped itself over me like a shroud. All around, the whispers quieted, replaced by a heavy stillness that seemed to pulse with unseen anticipation. I stood frozen, my heart drumming an erratic rhythm in my chest like the rhythm of a warning bell. The shadows, momentarily stilled by the collapse, hung in the air as if watching, waiting for me to make a single misstep. Then, as if on cue, the darkness quivered, slithering towards me with a slow, deliberate hunger. Paralyzed by the uncanny silence and vast uncertainty, I backed up against the rough surface of the new brick wall. An unfamiliar thought flickered in the recesses of my mind. What if this was not merely a haunted house? What if it was a prison home to the malevolent trapped souls and their endless torment? I wanted to scream, to lash out, but no sound emerged. Instead, the air thickened, weighing heavily against my skin, pulsing as if it breathed. Suddenly, the oppressive quiet shattered. An agonizing scream pierced the air from somewhere within the depths of the house. It rang out in wild desperation, spiraling into the void as another voice joined it, then another, until the sound encompassed me, wrapping tighter around my senses. I stumbled forward, instinct pulling me toward the source of the wails. Each step sent tremors through the ground as if I were walking on the bones of the lost. Faint hopes flickered in my chest. Perhaps there were others trapped, still searching for escape. Perhaps they needed my help just as much as I needed to find a way out. The floor beneath me throbbed, guiding me deeper. I felt as though I were being pulled, led by a haunting instinct that whispered to me softly amid the anguish a promise of salvation. I meandered through a darkened corridor, walls adorned with memories painted in desperate strokes, shadows of children's laughter, and the echo of a happier time haunting the frames. As I rounded a corner, a flickering candle emerged, sputtering weakly in the dimness. Its glow offered a glimmer of hope amidst the malevolence. I approached it hesitant but hopeful, my breath stilled by its fragile light. In its glow, a tattered photograph fluttered nearby, and I snatched it from the ground. The image depicted a group of children laughing, their faces alive with joy. One child, her hair a cascade of dark curls, stood in the center, eyes gleaming with mischief. That same girl I had seen in the fire's flames. I shivered, a chill racing down my spine. How was it possible? Was she watching me now? Was her laughter that I could still hear echoing throughout these halls? The whispers swelled again, merging into a cacophony of frantic pleas. "You shouldn't be here," they warned. "Go back. You have to go back." I spun around desperately, attempting to locate the source, but the shadows had deepened, consuming the flickering candlelight entirely. Panic gripped me as I fumbled to steady the photograph, the soft faces morphing into a grotesque tableau of twisted fear and sorrow. In my gut, I knew I was being toyed with. Before I could react, something scuttled across the floor, the sound sharp and unnatural, echoing through the silence. I clutched the photograph closer, and the soft pattering grew louder, reverberating until it felt as if the very walls themselves were beginning to come alive, longing for vengeance. I glanced at the shadows curling around the corner. Slivers of movement darted, their forms indistinguishable yet sentient. "Help us," came a forlorn whisper, sickly sweet like syrup laced with poison. It sounded so genuinely remorseful, and yet beneath lay something darker, something needing to fill the void with others, like them, lost and craving life once again. I forced myself to keep moving, following the scuttling noise. It turned and twisted further down the hallway, just out of sight. A desperate urge surged within me. Perhaps it would lead me to the light I so desperately sought, or even to salvation. But the logical part of my mind screamed that it was a trop, a siren's call luring me further into darkness. I rounded another corner, the walls constricting around me, thick shadows blending to form a ghastly visage, a face I recognized feebly from the photograph. The girl, her mouth impossibly wide, stretching into a rictus grin that sent icy fingers clawing at my sanity. I staggered back, but behind me, the darkness pressed in, suffocating my retreat. Suddenly, fingers, not just shadows, brushed against my arm, their touch cold and clammy, unsure. My breath left me in a gasp as a myriad of spectral faces emerged, their mouths moving rapidly, but no sounds emerged. They bore witness to my torment, their hollow eyes silently pleading for my compliance. Then came another sound, a thud, reverberating like a heartbeat against the silence, crawling closer. It was heavy, filled with slow determination. In that heartbeat of impending dread, I realized I was not alone. The entity in that haunted void had shifted, and it was watching, waiting for me to make my final decision. The darkness surged toward me, the chant intensifying, feeding on my fear. I couldn't escape the reality gnawing at my core. I was out of time. "Save us!" came the echo yet again, accompanied by a sudden rush of wind that seemed to pulse with enraged whispers, alive with desire to consume, to envelop. And in that moment, the candle flickered violently before extinguishing, plunging me into utter darkness. Then, just as abruptly as the light vanished, I felt a pull. The shadow whispered my name, dragging me towards it with a merciless grip. Amidst the void, panic surged in my chest. The inky blackness was alive, filled with shadows that promised power and despair, and just then, I felt an ice-cold breath against my neck. Join us or be taken. The darkness enveloped me like a shroud, and with a final, desperate thought of escape burning bright within me, I felt myself fade into the depths, the suffocating cold swallowing my being whole. But one thought remained: who would I become? As the icy grip of the darkness tightened around me, I became acutely aware of my own heartbeat, a frantic, inverted drum echoing in the vastness. The whispers surged, echoing like a tidal wave of distress, crashing into my mind with chilling clarity. "Join us or be taken," they hissed, their voices entwining in a horrifying chant as shapes writhed around me, indistinct but swollen with malice. I could not see them, yet I felt their presence, a bitter cold that seemed to seep into my very bones. The weight of despair pressed upon my chest. They were protesting, stifling cries hanging in the air, souls eternally trapped within this malevolent realm, forever echoing the same sickening yearning. The air crackled with a taunting electricity, and my skin prickled as though every hair on my body stood at attention, aware of the danger lurking just beyond the threshold of sight. A sudden jolt echoed, reverberating through the space, like an agitated heartbeat of the very walls. Ghosts of laughter morphed into howls of anguish, swirling chaotically around my truth. "Help us!" one faint voice pleaded, clawing at the remnants of my sanity. It felt almost human, a spark of what used to be, desperately reaching for salvation that would never come. Time blurred, seconds stretching into an eternity under the crushing weight of despair. I desperately fumbled to find my way through the darkness, but it twisted and curled, creating a labyrinth of despair. I felt as though I walked on liquid shadows, where the ground itself wished to swallow me whole and drown me in its sorrow. "Go back," came a furious whisper that seemed to physically strike me, akin to a slap across the face. But where was back now? The path I had wandered had warped under fear's relentless grip, shifting and folding into one another, leaving only an empty narrative behind. Then, through the oppressive shroud, flickers of light began to punctuate the darkness, each one an agonizing reminder of the warmth and safety now lost. I spotted what appeared to be a door, a warped wooden relic standing ajar in a flickering glow that beckoned me. It felt like betrayal to approach it, yet something drove me onward. Each step towards the door was a battle against the gnawing dread crawling under my skin. As I neared, the whispers crescendoed into a clattering frenzy, sharp and urgent, pulling at the corners of my mind while urging me to flee. "Join us," they cried in incessant torment, the phrase hauntingly undeviating. The door loomed larger, its age evident as the wood groaned under time's steady torment. I knew deep down my existence was but a whispered breath against the howling winds of this nightmare, yet still my fingers reached out, brushing against the cold surface, its presence anchoring me despite the swirling echoes of despair. "Don't open it!" a voice shrieked, echoing through the darkness, a warning saturated with terror. Yet curiosity overrode reason, and with one swift motion, I pushed the door open, releasing the quiet creak of ancient hinges into the void. What lay beyond was a chaotic swirl of visions and memories bathed in stark, unsettling light. Faces flashed before me, their expressions grotesquely distorted, each one seemingly fighting for release, fighting for attention. The girl from the photograph gazed back at me, her pleas drowned in grief, her dark curls framing a face that screamed the silent agony of never-ending entrapment. Terror gripped me anew as I stumbled into the other side, crossing the threshold into a room lined with mirrors, each reflecting not only my image, but also the twisted faces of the damned, desperately clawing at the glass, mouths contorted in silent screams. Instantly aware of their collective despair, I pressed against the nearest mirror, hands landing on its icy surface. Shadows began to stretch from the edges, tendrils of darkness snaking toward me. They seeped from the reflections, intertwining around my wrists, pulling me closer to the glass. And oh! I screamed, half in realization, half in denial, yet my voice faltered against the suffocating silence. A reflection beside me, that of the girl, grinned wickedly, her features shifting and breaking like shards of glass. With widening eyes, I saw other faces merge, twisting into one another in a gruesome ballet of flesh begging for a sliver of life. Then, the surface of the mirror rippled, resembling water disturbed by unseen forces, and suddenly, the very room felt alive. The shadows began to swirl more vigorously. The whispers turned explosive, echoing off the mirrored walls, overwhelming me with their unbearable weight. "Join us. You're home," they clamored, voices culminating into a shrieking storm, storming my thoughts, no longer just cries for help, but a demand imploring me to surrender, to accept that there was no escape. A horrifying truth washed over me. Every soul begged for more than just release. They craved life, each desperately seeking to pull me into their eternal hell, to fill their empty voids with fresh terror. In that moment, realization struck like the lightning of a distant storm. There was no salvation within these walls, no flicker of hope, only the promise of becoming another unwilling echo, another face trapped between worlds. And then the ground shook violently beneath me. The mirrors exploded with sound, shards of glass flying like venomous daggers, as I was torn from the depths of my anguish. I was forced to the surface of consciousness, the swirling horror dragging me closer to a fate worse than death. With a sudden surge, I yanked my arms free from the icy grasp of the shadows, stumbling backward out of the room. Gasping, I turned to flee, yet just as I reached the threshold, the twisted figure of the girl loomed over me, whispering gut-wrenching secrets that seeped into my very essence. "Where do you think you're going?" she hissed, inching ever closer, her eyes shining with a sickly light that sent shards of terror ripping through my spine. In that moment of frozen dread, I realized the whispers no longer sought my companionship, they wanted me to be their vessel. "Join us," echoed in my mind as I turned to run, plunging back into the darkness, my racing heart drowning in the cacophony of ghostly wails. And the last thing I heard before the shadows consumed me was a chilling chorus, "You can't escape what you already are." And in the heart of the void, something grasped within my Menda's seat of despair, rotting the last remnants of hope. I was not fleeing. I was entering their embrace. The echoes of my own footsteps dissolved into the void as I ran, my breath heavy with a blend of fear and desperation. Shadows grabbed at my ankles, eager to drag me back into their abyss. The cacophony of whispers merged into a singular consciousness, a rhythmic chanting that pulsed in harmony with my racing heart. Each syllable, "Join us," coiled tighter around my mind like a serpent squeezing the last breath from its prey. Frantically, I darted through halls that morphed beneath my feet, transforming into a maze devoid of logic. I could feel the walls pulsating, as though they were alive, thrumming with a heartbeat that resonated deep and dark, an echo of the insatiable hunger that lay hidden in their corners. Panic surged as I pressed myself against the damp, cold stone, trying to orient myself against its unsettling heartbeat. Suddenly, a chilling wail sliced through the gloom, a cry that seemed to resonate from just beyond the fabric of reality. The guttural sound twisted inside my chest, forcing me to take 1, 2, then 3 hesitant steps forward. Was it a plea? A warning? Or something far worse, a siren's song that promised an end to my misery? I crept down a corridor, so narrow I could feel the chill of the walls brush against my skin. Each shudder of the beams overhead sent ripples of fear racing down my spine. As I pushed deeper into this labyrinth, the air thickened. Visibility dropped until I was immersed in a darkness so complete that I could barely see the twisting shapes on the periphery of my vision, phantoms that danced on the edge of clarity, waiting. "Help me!" a youthful voice cried out, trembling with unearthly sorrow. It belonged to a girl, perhaps the very same from the mirrors. Instinct tugged at my heart, a grotesque mix of compassion and sheer terror. Was I truly able to help another soul, or was I simply stealing from my own hope, damning myself further? "Where are you?" I shouted, adrenaline coursing as I searched for the source of the plea. The ground beneath me felt unstable, as if it wished to shift and swallow me whole. I took a cautious step, and the floor released a soft groan in response, a warning echoing from the depths of despair. Her voice chimed again, drawing me closer, luring me down another corridor, where the shadows roiled like a tempest. "In here! Quick!" she implored, urgency staining her tone, pulling me with an invisible thread toward a door slightly ajar, the dimmest of lights flickering within. With reckless abandon, I flung the door wide and stumbled into the room, panting. Inside, the air thickened with the scent of decay. The walls bore the marks of time caked in grime and dark stains that writhed with movement, as if holding the memories of desperate souls. Strange symbols danced in the shadows, pulsating with a malevolent energy that threatened to devour me whole. "You're here. You're finally here." The girl's voice was a tremulous melody, floating through the cluttered air like smoke. I scanned the dimly lit space, my breath catching in my throat as I finally laid eyes on her. She stood in the corner, shrouded in ragged cloth that hung from limbs too thin. Her skin glimmered with an unnatural sheen, pale and almost transparent. Eyes that glowed with an ethereal light bored into me, a mix of longing and despair. "Help me finish this," she whispered, stepping closer, her face morphing, twisting. "We need you to join us." As she stretched out her hand, a wave of shadows surged, piercing my vision with darkness. I felt the cold drip of dread seep through my veins. I tried to move back, but the door slammed shut behind me, imprisoning my instinct to flee. The walls of the room seemed to pulsate then, rhythmic as a heartbeat, and I realized with sickening clarity this was the chamber of the entrapped, where their essence mingled with despair, ripe for harvesting. The air crackled with hostility, the temperature plummeting. Ghostly figures began to materialize alongside her, emerging from the walls, faces twisted in agony, each mouth whispering the same incantation, begging for release. "Join us, we've been waiting." "No," I gasped, panic lacing through me as I backed toward the door, desperate fingers clawing at the wood, begging it to yield. But the girl took another step forward, her features stretching into a grotesque mask filled with hunger, her eyes swirling with shadows. "You need to help us break free. You can be one of us." With a sudden rush, the figures lunged forward, arms reaching through the mist to grasp at my limbs, their murmurs blurring into a chaotic symphony of despair. The darkness enveloped me, and I felt myself teetering on the edge of a chasm, as if the very ground beneath me sought to swallow me whole. In the chaotic cusp of vibrant shadows and cold terror, I heard their voices knot together in a crescendo that pushed forth an unfathomable truth. I was not merely an unwilling participant. I was meant to be the final puzzle piece in their twisted game. The darkness surged forward, the girl's hands grasping my arm, pulling, and at that moment, the world faded into a blaring white noise. Then, silence. In the eye of a suffocating storm, I found myself standing on the edge of nothing, murmurs fading into oblivion, feeling the remnants of lost souls swirl around me like a thick mist. They whispered again, "Will you stay or will you break the cycle?" What had I become? The shadows quivered around me, and I wasn't sure if I had just been rescued or if I had stepped into a fate worse than the void itself. But the urge to return to the darkness tugged at my Korean intoxicating pull that promised safety while cloaking me in uncertainty. And then I heard an unmistakable sound reverberated through the stillness, a heavy thud, like a heartbeat echoing from deep within the walls, reverberating with sinister intent. The door behind me cracked open, revealing a darkness so thick it made the shadows quail. A whisper curled around my ear, seductive and beguiling, urging me to step back into the void. Join or be lost forever. As I glanced back into the roomy only solace, now a realm of despair, I realized the choice had never been mine to make. A figure stepped across the threshold, shrouded by shadows, yet I could feel the menace radiating from a dark truth that still loomed, just beyond comprehension. With dread inexplicable gripping my throat, I knew I was standing on the precipice of an unspeakable decision. The weight of the air pressed down on me, suffocating and electric all at once, as that dark figure emerged from the threshold, a tapestry of despair woven into its very being. The whispers intensified, a cacophony of pleading voices merging with its own, demanding my attention, demanding my submission. I stepped back, heart racing, but the walls seemed to pulse, closing in around me, as if they were eager to consume me. The cold, clammy moisture from the stone soaked into my skin, numbing my fingers, paralyzing my thoughts. I was caught, a fly in the web of something ancient and unspeakably vile. Why do you resist? The figure's voice slithered through the darkness, smooth yet rough, a mockery of soothing tones. It seemed to shift, its form bending and twisting, unsettling and hypnotic, resting somewhere between human and shadow. What do you want? I choked out, my voice barely rising above the whisper of shadow, my gaze darting between the figure and the girl, who now stood eerily still, her ghastly features locked in a haunting smile. To fulfill your destiny, it replied, a hint of pleasure cracking through the tone. You are the final key in our sacred ritual, the boundless energy that will complete us. Imagine the power of souls entwined, unbreakable, unfathomable. I don't want to be a part of this, I shouted, suddenly fueled by a desperate surge of will. But each pulse from the walls echoed back with a cold refusal, and the shadows surged closer, greedy for my fear. You're all trapped here. I can't. You will, it hissed, a sudden rush of air stinging my cheeks, as the girl's glowing eyes shimmered with fervor. You already are. In that instant, I felt an icy tendril snake around my ankle, wrapping tight as if claiming me for its own. I kicked, scrambling to regain control, but my feet slipped against the slick stone floor as the other figures hissed and coiled from the walls, like serpents unleashed. The girl's haunting voice wafted through, help us feel our pain, absorb it. A torrent of agony mingled with their whispers, the shadows swirling with the tortured remnants of the souls they had ensnared, feeding on their despair, urging me to take the plunge into their darkness. No. I want surrender, I yelled, though my heart raced with terror at the sight of the figure moving closer, the girl's arms stretching wide, as if to embrace me, shadows thickening around her fragile form. Choose, it growled, extending its dark fingers toward me. Join us willingly, or be consumed entirely. There is no escape. With a surge of adrenaline, I hurled myself backward, crashing against the door. I could feel the energy pulling me, the gravitational force of longing tangled in the threads of despair. The whispering grew frantic, a storm of sound demanding I listen, howling with rage when I hesitated. Just then, a thunderous crack sounded above, vibrating through the air and shaking the stones. A jagged fissure split the ceiling, sending debris raining down around me. In the ensuing chaos, the walls shuddered, releasing a wail echoed by the trapped souls, who realized their last hope might be slipping away. In the chaos, I caught a faint glimpse of a more sinister being lurking at the edge of shadows, the true source of this malevolencia, monstrous silhouette merging into the void, a figure corrupted by countless anguished souls. Its eyes, twin voids of despair, fixed upon me like a predator brimming with hunger. I could feel the air thickening, my breath hitching as the whispers crescendoed into a violent roar, vibrating through my bones. Just then, the world tilted, and the door cracked open just wide enough. "Run!" A voice faint yet piercing echoed through the cacophony. Was it real? Or merely another trick of the darkness? The figure lunged, shadows erupting forth in a wave that threatened to swallow me whole. The choice was no longer mine. It transformed into a primal instinct for survival. My feet found their purpose, propelling me through the cracked doorway into the hallway filled with harrowing echoes. But as I crossed the threshold, I felt a violent tug at my spirit, a cold rush that dragged toward the chamber behind me. I stumbled, the shadow shrieking in fury, reaching out with icy fingers that grazed my skin, clawing at my resolve. I glanced back, locking eyes with the girl, who stood in frozen agony, her expression a pause of longing and torment, caught between her desires and the reality of my escape. In that moment, I realized I had become intertwined with this horror, destined to be nothing more than a keeper of their secrets. And just beyond the doorway, the figure emerged fully, its towering shadow eclipsing me as it let out a primal roar, a summons echoing through the void that promised doom. "You can't leave." Not yet. The corridor twisted and darkened as the walls pulsed, urging me back, and just as the darkness surged forward, a flicker of light ignited in the distance. "Choose!" I screamed into the chaos, torn between the growing shadows behind me that beckoned with dark promises, and the flickering light, a beacon of hope or a trap cloaked in illusion. I was spiraling down a path where every decision unraveled reality itself. I took a deep breath, suddenly aware that whatever lay ahead would shape my fate forever. With shadows closing in, I raced toward the light, the whispers clawing at my mind, urging me to turn back. But deep inside, I already knew I had crossed a threshold far too perilous to ever return from. The light flickered as I sprinted forward, a wavering hope amidst the encroaching darkness. It beckoned me, promising safety even as the shadows behind me roared in furious outrage, clawing at the edges of reality. I felt the oppressive weight of malevolence trailing my every step, invisible fingernails grazing my skin like whispers of despair. As I neared the light, it dimmed momentarily, revealing grotesque forms trapped within the wall, faces twisted in silent screams, their eyes wide with horror. They were mere echoes of the figures I had encountered, walled in like haunting reminders of those who had fallen victim to the same insidious pull. Each one seemed to reach out, mouths moving in desperate unison, beseeching me to stay, to listen, to turn back. Suddenly, I stumbled, my ankle twisting viciously on the uneven stone floor. I fell to my knees, gasping, and the adrenaline surged out of me, leaving behind a deep pit of dread that clawed at my chest. The flickering light flickered out as I absorbed the terror of their trapped souls, the remnants of hope snuffed in an instant. I glanced up, and for a heart-stopping moment, I locked eyes with a figure among the trapped souls, a woman with long, unkempt hair bordering on frantically wild, her gaze piercing through the gloom. "Help me, please!" she cried, suffering woven into her voice. "They'll take you too." "You cannot." Before I could truly process her warning, the light flared back into existence like a defiant star. The very air hummed, resonating with urgency, and a breathless surge of desperation pushed me to regain my footing. I had felt the cold tendrils of despair twining around me even before, but now I could almost hear them shriek with rage. Pushing forward, I flung myself toward the light, my fear morphing into furious resolve. It pulsed with warmth, wrapping around me like an embrace, urging me onward. Yet, even as my outstretched fingers reached for this soothing glow, a frigid gust of wind swept through, chilling my bones and threatening to tear me away from the safety I longed for. The walls around me shuddered with malevolence, and the shadowy figure slithered closer, its form twisting and reforming as if it were made of mist and agony. Its presence disturbed the very fabric of the air, sending ripples of dread rippling through my body. "You foolish child," it hissed, the words sliding like venom. "You think you can escape what is already yours?" A chorus of anguished screams erupted in response, a deafening crescendo of despair marking the passing of time, each cry an echo of failure, of lives extinguished, tethered to the malevolence lurking so close. The woman's eyes widened, realizing my resolve to break free was waning. "Hell pull you in. The choice makes you his." With a burst of instinct, I turned my gaze back to the light, clenching my fists. The shadows seemed to congeal, the whispers mad with fury, reaching for me like grasping hands desperate for one last embrace. I shot forward, all reasoning swept away in my singular hunger for survival. And just as I broke the threshold of light, the world twisted again. The blinding luminescence flickered violently, revealing the figure swirling in the periphery, shrieking accusations that turned my stomach. "You will not escape! You will never escape!" Before I could comprehend what was happening, a blinding flash erupted, forcing me to shield my eyes. Within that searing glare, I caught one final glimpse of the girl and the woman merging into the darkness that had imprisoned them for eternity. Their figures distorted, trapped in expressions of sorrowful longing. And as the light began to fade again, I felt a sharp pull bursting from deep within my chest, an ancient tether yanking me back. It felt like roots of despair pulling at my very essence, tearing me apart. The periphery of reality blurred and twisted, sickeningly, until the light vanished altogether, casting me into murky blackness. The whispering voices twisted into chaotic screams, urging me to surrender, clawing at the shreds of my sanity. I succumbed to a world wrapped in shadows. And yet another horrifying realization slithered into my mind. Something worse awaited in the darker corners of this abyss. And in that dread-filled stillness, a pair of cold, hollow eyes blinked into existence before me, the reflection of countless souls twisting in eternal torment. "Welcome home," it whispered with a perverse satisfaction. The darkness swallowed my screams, and I felt myself falling deeper, entangled in the weight of secrets I had yet to uncover. Just then, I heard a familiar voice, soft yet cutting through the terror like a knife. "You're one of us now." In that moment, I understood the darkness was not just a facade, it pulsated with life, ready to reveal every horrific truth I had ever wished to escape. And as the cold hands grasped my shoulders, I knew I had crossed a line from which there was no return. The darkness enveloped me, a suffocating blanket of despair. It felt sentient, as if it absorbed my terror, compounding it into a living entity that feasted on my fear. I tried to rationalize my circumstances. Thoughts spiraled through my mind, desperate for understanding, and yet all potential explanations evaporated beneath the oppressive weight of night. The hollow eyes that had greeted me were now surrounded by shadows, vast and inescapable. Serpentine forms writhed at the edges of my vision, like the remnants of those once trapped in the walls. Whispers peppered my thoughts, words indistinct yet laden with heavy implications. "You're one of us now," echoed ominously, beating against the walls of my reasoning like a relentless tide. I inched backward, instinct nudging me to retreat, but every attempt only pulled me deeper into the fathomless void. The feeling of something ancient lurking just beyond my perception prickled at the back of my neck, thick with malevolence, promising familiarity, yet hinting at grotesqueries I was yet to comprehend. Suddenly, the space around me rippled, and disembodied faces began to emerge from the darkness, grotesque caricatures of anguished beings. They hovered before me, their expressions a morose reflection of sorrow and disinterest mingled with cruel anticipation. With every slow pulsation, they grew real, pulling me into their collective narrative, a living tapestry woven from despair. "Join us," they chanted in unison, a hypnotic cadence that echoed around me, coaxing and pulling. "Feel the freedom of oblivion." An insatiable urge surged within me to resist, not out of bravery, but sheer instinct for self-preservation. I closed my eyes and tightened my fists, the remnants of humanity flickering inside me, staving off the consuming shadows. In that moment, a thought pierced through the fog. Escape might be possible, but it would come with a price. Leave! I screamed, my voice tearing through the thick veil of whispers, the act drawing attention from both the trap and the darkness itself. Their eyes widened, a fleeting glimpse of surprise before they recoiled, as if my words burned against their skin. In that hesitation, I felt emboldened and yelled again, louder this time, "I won't be like you." The faces contorted in anger, shifting and morphing into expressions defined by rage, and the darkness twisted, forming a gaping maw that threatened to swallow me whole. I felt a surge. Perhaps I could manipulate the energy surrounding me. I gathered every ounce of willpower, summoning whatever fragmented hope still flickered within the void, shouting, "I choose to fight." The shadows lashed out with fury, flinging tendrils of darkness that wrapped around me like chains, pulling me back. Yet, as will met malevolence, an unexpected eruption resonated deep within the very fabric of darkness. A rift formed, pulsating with light outrageously out of place among the obsidian tapestry. The very presence of hope ignited shadows, revealing not just the hidden faces, but glimpses of forms I could barely comprehend. The remains of the ones snatched away by despair, their cries lingering like smoke. "Help! Help us!" their voices cried, but I was too busy wrestling with the chains that sought to claim me. As I fought against those clutches, a new terror unfurled. I sensed an entity in passionless voyeurism, watching my every struggle with insatiable glee. Far behind the writhing shadows, it awaited patiently, looming ever large the source of my torment. Shadows twisted to unveil its figure, grotesque and vast, being sculpted from the fears of all the lost souls around me. They fed from it, their anguished faces becoming one with a dark grandeur, a hunger for oblivion. With frantic desperation, I searched for a way to shatter the chains, to free myself from this nightmare. The faces were still pleading, their combined angst layering over one another, and suddenly I realized, my rage for survival could be their salvation. Together, I yelled, certain of my declaration, we break free. The echoes strengthened, amplifying our mutual yearning, forming a bond in shared suffering. The chain slackened, and emboldened, I pushed against the dark, feeling the energy thrumming beneath my skin, drawing on those lost souls' despair to fuel my resistance. But the larger entity, the shadow that sought dominion over our fates, shifted, manifesting into an unimaginable form, a maw filled with jagged teeth. It had been waiting, hungry, and frustrated by the intensity of my defiance. "Foolish interloper," it thundered, rippling across what remained of reality. "You believe you can orchestrate your fate?" Just then, the flickering light reappeared, bright and blinding, pouring through the rift like a flood. The shadows recoiled, shrieking as the radiance pierced the darkness. The faces of the lost wailed in longing, flickering between the vision of freedom and eternal entrapment. And in that blinding moment, I felt my spirit pull between two worlds, the light and the insatiable maw. I was utterly, violently torn apart, the shutters of existence tearing at the shards of my reality. As the light began to fade yet again, I knew then that salvation and doom lay within the choice I had to make: seize the light and forfeit the chance to save those souls, or surrender to the terror that awaited, to become part of the darkness I so desperately fought against. Choosing forgiveness, I called, "Be free." But as I reached toward the glaring brightness, a thunderous roar burst from the creature behind, drowning my pleas. The rift began to close, and the darkness surged forward, funneling all its rage toward me. In that dreadful silence, I felt the touch of invisible hands caressing my skin, pulling me back into the abyss. The last word I could muster barely escaped my lips, a desperate prayer whispered against the void, "No!" But it was too late. The darkness swallowed me whole, the trap had closed, and reality shattered. The walls pulsated beneath my skin, a flesh-like barrier throbbing with sentience as I tried to gather my thoughts. I could feel the vacant gaze of dozens of souls trapped and waiting. They whispered stories layered with sorrow, and I could almost taste the despair on my tongue. Reality twisted like a serpent, and with each heartbeat, I felt my very essence begin to blend with theirs. I was not merely surrounded by darkness, I was becoming one with it. And then the truth struck me like a lash. They wanted men just to join their ranks, but to fulfill the dark hunger that gnawed within their collective soul. I was the fresh offering they craved, the spark to ignite the inferno of their vengeance. This house was not merely a prison, it was an insatiable parasite, feeding off fear, consuming those who dared wander too close to its unholy maw. Help us! They begged, their voices merging into a symphony of torment that echoed through the hollow chambers of my mind. But how could I help when the truth clawed at my insides like a ravenous beast, begging to be free? Every soul trapped within these walls had stories to share, families torn apart, lives stolen, laughter turned to sorrow. And yet here I stood, the unwilling savior on the brink of obliteration. I felt my resolve waning, pushed by an overwhelming sense of sorrow and confusion. As my panic mounted, I stumbled back, crashing against a wall that flickered and writhed with horror beneath my touch. In that moment, I realized I was no longer merely experiencing the terror, they were sharing it with me. I could feel every anguished moment they endured. Every plea fell upon me like an avalanche, drowning my own will in a sea of their despair. Join us! They echoed, the chorus rising to a fever pitch, deepening into a darkness that clamored not just for my presence, but my very soul. Yet amidst that cacophony, a subtle voice broke through, familiar and piercing. The girl with dark curls, the one who had initiated my descent into madness, appeared before me once more. But this time, her face bore a wicked scowl, twisted in anguish. "You cannot resist," she cried, a sudden rage igniting in her hollow eyes. "You're the last, the final piece to our reunion. Without you," she hesitated, glancing over her shoulder as though fearing something, "we remain here forever." "No!" I shouted, shaking my head, scrambling backwards against the wall, me back pressed against the suffocating shadows. "I won't be part of this." "I can't." But the shadows rippled, and all at once, they rushed toward me, hungry tendrils reaching out, seeking to pull me into their eternal embrace. They encircled me, drowning me in whispers, their voices intertwining into a maddening drone. "You will feel our pain. You will be one of us." A primal instinct to fight surged through me, but my feet felt weighted, the ground itself begging to swallow me whole. I could feel their icy fingers sifting through my memories, my identity. I was losing myself, losing the very essence that made me who I was. And just when I thought I would succumb to it all, something flickered within, a memory, a feeling of warmth amidst the chill. I needed to resist. The shadows paused for a heartbeat, seemingly sensing my defiance. I seized the moment, summoning every ounce of hope buried deep within me. I felt an unstable energy crackling around my core, intertwining with the anguished spirits that clung to me, teetering on the brink of oblivion. If I was to break free, this was the moment. Together! I cried into the vortex, feeling the shadows waver, their fury abating for just a moment. "We can escape this cage. I will not let you claim me." My voice rose, empowered by the sorrow of countless souls. "I choose light." The darkness howled as I pushed forward forcefully, a blinding radiance erupting from my core. The shadows recoiled, revealing glimpses of the figures that had been imprisoned. Glimmers of their former selves flickered through the black, desperate for release. The girl's face twisted, eyes narrowing in fury, merging back against her friends. "No! You'll regret this," she screeched as the darkness writhed around me like a storm. I pushed again, forcing the light to expand, swallowing the encroaching shadows, retreating like a flood before a dam. And suddenly, amidst the blinding glow, the trapped faces emerged, faces I had seen in the articles, their features now illuminated and shimmering with the promise of salvation. But just as I reached toward them, a horrifying realization gripped me. What if they can never be free? What if they want me to take their place? I felt the twining chains of despair swirling back, fraying threads connecting my essence to theirs. The shimmering light swirling with an oppressive force seemed to push me to surrender, and that was when I knew the horrid truth. The very last piece of this horrifying puzzle was me. I wasn't just the final key. I was to become their vessel, their new puppet, lured by the hope of salvation but twisted into a new layer of darkness. Heart racing, I turned, fighting as I felt myself being dragged back, a familiar abyss opening beneath my feet. "No!" I shouted, my voice lost beneath the echoing cries of the tortured souls. As if in response to my desperation, the space around me surged, and the threshold of light shimmered tantalizingly close, yet that darkness lingered, groping at my feet, hungry for more. A horrible choice materialized: trust the flickering hope of freedom offered by the very souls that had led me to this moment, or plunge headlong into the veil of despair that promised me a unique eternity bound to their collective madness. And then, as I glanced back at the faces, it all became clear: no one ever truly escapes this house. With a final surge of light pulsating around me, I sprinted toward the flickering glow, fighting against the shadows that grasped at my heels, and felt an agonizing weight tearing through me the closer I got. I burst into the sanctuary of the brilliance, my heart racing with fear and exhilaration. But as I crossed into the light, the world around me fractured. The brightness shattered into brilliant shards, descending into a deep darkness. I felt them all pulling inside me, their whispers full of sorrow, hope, betrayal. And as the darkness reclaimed me, the last whispers echoed through my mind: "You'll never truly leave." I collapsed back, eyes widening in horror, as the chilling realization suffocated me. The horror wasn't leaving. The evil had only begun. The boundaries were blurred, and now I was one with them. A final echo enveloped my being: "We are eternal."